Welcome back, delegates. If you would all like to take your seats, please. Good afternoon, friends. I hope you've all had some refreshment, and really good to see everybody back here and all on time, just about. That's very welcome indeed. Can I also welcome those who are joining us as we now enter the public space of our conference. We are moving on to our formal launch of the Scottish National Party's 90th annual gathering, and it's with great pleasure that in a few moments that we will all hear from our Deputy Leader, Keith Brown, MSP. And I know that Keith will be no stranger to anyone in this hall, given the hours and the miles that he puts in to visit constituency associations, branches, and to help out in local campaigns as well. And I hope Keith doesn't mind, but in case nobody knows, Keith is also now a grandfather, so we should all congratulate him. So, given that we are all in the business of standing up for Scotland and redoubling our efforts as a party and as a movement to persuade the people of Scotland that independence is indeed in the best interest of our collective future, it gives me very great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Keith Brown, MEP and Deputy Leader of the Scottish National Party, who is now going to make his address and formally open conference. Thank you, Keith.
Good afternoon, conference. I should say, first of all, to explain this tie, it's not just that I'm an Uber loyalist that I've got SNP emblazoned on the tie, but this morning, instead of coming straight to conference, I had to pick up a dear friend, so I had to go through to Glasgow and forgot to pick up the ties I'd laid out to bring. And I mention that because I want to mention that friend. That friend is somebody known to everybody, I think, in this hall, certainly most people in this hall, someone that's done a huge amount of work for independence and for our cause, someone who continues to do a huge amount of work, but is going through a tough time just now. So could you show your appreciation for Christina McKelvey, MSP? I can tell by that look I'm going to get pelters after we move out of here. But friends, it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to our 90th annual SNP conference. And of course, a lot has happened since last we gathered in Aberdeen. And I want to begin my remarks by, first of all, paying tribute to Humza Yousaf. Throughout his leadership, Humza conducted himself with the utmost grace and integrity, and he demonstrated the values of inclusion and international solidarity that this party prides itself on, and in particular, his passionate advocacy for peace in Gaza during what were times of unimaginable torment for him and his family, showed the mark of the man and demonstrated the true leadership which was so sadly lacking from the Westminster parties. And I know that Humza will continue to make an important contribution both to the SNP and to the cause of independence. And I want to thank him for all that he did for our party and for our country. Thank you, Humza. At conference, as we heard this morning, we now have a new party leader in John Swinney. John is a man of unparalleled experience in Scottish politics, and he stepped up a time when his party and his country needed him most. He is a man who has dedicated his entire adult life to the cause that we all hold so dear. And I personally can think of no one better to be leading the SNP into our next chapter. And as we face the challenge of a renewed onslaught of Westminster austerity, there is absolutely nobody that I would trust more to stand up for Scotland and to demonstrate the leadership that we need to defend Scotland's values. And there's no question, friends, that this past year has tested our resolve and our commitment to our shared cause. We've faced significant challenges within our party over the last 12 to 18 months. And in July, of course, we had to bid farewell to too many dedicated ambassadors for independence, along with the hard-working staff who supported them in that task. And I want, on behalf of the party, to extend my deepest gratitude to each and every one of them, MPs and staff. But I look forward to continuing the journey towards independence together in whatever capacity they choose to follow. Delegates, in the aftermath and it's particularly gratifying to see so many former MPs and their staff with us here today. Delegates, in the aftermath of the general election, John Swinney has ensured that the SNP has been thoughtfully, considerately discussing the challenges that we face as a party. He has facilitated discussions with our members the length and breadth of Scotland. We've spoken with activists, with candidates, and we've reached out to every single member in our party. I don't know what the final figure was, but it was certainly into 5 figures, the number of members that responded to the member survey. Bear in mind, if you combined all the membership of the other parties, you couldn't even get into 5 figures. So that's an astonishing level of engagement. And John wanted to do that, to share ideas, to share the feedback, which we have to make sure that we understand what's happened in order that we can better prosecute the case for independence. So I'm deeply grateful to everybody in the party who has engaged over this time. And I was delighted that so many contributed in the culmination of that discussion this morning. And now, as a party, it's time for us to move forward. I think we would all like more time to discuss those things, but we've got an election and independence to win, so we have to move forward. We have to learn the lessons from the past, of course, but we also have to be focused relentlessly on Scotland's future. One of the points made by this morning was all the achievements, all the fantastic things which the SNP government since 2007 has done for Scotland are great, but we have to say what we will now and what independence will now do for Scotland. Because there's never been a more important time for the SNP to be standing up for Scotland. Now, our opponents would have you believe that the SNP and the cause of independence are over and finished. They suggest it's time for us to pack up and go home. These are the same people who claim that winning 56 or 48 out of 59 Westminster constituencies, or 63 or 64 seats in Holyrood, were not sufficient mandates. And now they tell us that a party not achieving a majority of seats has to accept defeat and abandon hope. Of course, these are one of the strange rules that only ever apply to the SNP and to independence. And I wonder if anybody can remember these voices calling for Labour to abandon their cause when they won 1 seat out of 59 in Scotland. Or for the Conservative voices calling for us to desist from campaigning for independence when they got 0 seats out of 72 seats. So we've never achieved that. As was mentioned this morning, tough though that election result was, it was the 5th best result we've had in 25 elections, 30% of the vote. And let's not forget that the same flawed first-past-the-post system that benefited us in 2015, and it did, and subsequently, that has now given Labour the jackpot with 37 out of 56 seats, despite only winning 35% of the vote, while we secured 30% of that vote, but far fewer seats. But friends, the idea of independence has faced much bigger setbacks than this. John often talks about the years that he's been in the party, and I was a few years after him. But in 1984, when I joined, going round a by-election in Arbroath, as I recall, which we won actually, Ken Gild won the seat, it was 1 in every 10 or 15 doors before you could get somebody supporting the SNP or independence. Interestingly, the idea you're called a careerist when in the early 1980s you joined the SNP, I'm not sure what kind of career you were hoping for by joining the SNP in the 1980s. But we have faced tough times in the past. In relation to internal work within the party, which John has ensured has continued, are the stabilisation of the party's finances and growing our membership, still larger, much larger than all the other parties in Scotland combined. Now, I don't know what the other parties' membership. I'm willing to guess if you added them all together and doubled it, they wouldn't match the 65,000 members that we have. If I'm wrong, let them say so. Tell us what your membership is, but they won't do that. We also, let's not forget, have by far the largest number of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament. And my prediction is, there's a great deal to look forward to. I think we will regroup, just talking to delegates, the idea of, in defiance of the result, that we go forward, that we redouble our efforts, we continue our mission to achieve Scotland's independence. And when we get knocked down, we get back up again. And now we face a Labour Party in power, claiming victory on a message of change. And yet tens of thousands of our pensioners are about to experience the harsh reality of Labour's change. Stripping away the winter fuel allowance while allowing a 10% increase in the energy price cap will mean many of our pensioners facing a winter of misery and freezing. Labour's promise of change was a lie. Anas Sarwar told us to read his lips when he vowed no tax hikes, no more austerity, but we now see those were empty words. And as we approach the 2026 election, I believe that Anas Sarwar will come to regret his part in deceiving the Scottish people. And Labour under Keir Starmer is doubling down on failed Tory austerity. The black hole in their finances, predicted by economists, by the IFS, by John Swinney, probably even by the dogs in the street, everyone knew about the £18 billion black hole, apart from the Labour Party, apparently. So rather than the first year of a new government, what we're about to do is enter the 15th year of a government which is still defined by David Cameron and George Osborne. Austerity. And I think if you talk to people, you can already see the effect of that. This is not what they voted for. And Labour prided themselves after the election. It was John McTiernan. What was really good about that election, he said, was that our manifesto was so vague we can't be held to anything. The problem is, people invested in the idea of change. They thought real change was going to come. And now they realise there is no change. It's continuing Brexit, it's continuing austerity. And that's a big problem that Labour are already encountering. Those who hoped to vote out the Tories were deceived by Labour's illusory change. And is this endless cycle of misery Scotland has to endure inevitable? Alternating between Tory and Labour bouts of austerity, all while being isolated in a broken Brexit Britain. It does not have to be this way. We, the SNP, independents, can create a Scotland that rejoins, first of all, the largest market in the world, the EU. We can have a situation where our pensioners live with dignity and not with fear and not with the cold. A Scotland where our abundant natural resources, once they've squandered all the oil billions, they now want to move on to renewable energy wealth. But we could use that to fund strong public services and decent wages for all our public services. And it's interesting that Rachel Reeves is now attacking the SNP for spending too much money on paying public sector workers. That's the Labour Party. Conference, the SNP, by contrast, is showing the people of Scotland every single day what can be achieved, even with the limited powers of devolution. In government, we are using all the powers that we have to transform the lives of people in this country every single day. The evidence is clear. Since the people of Scotland put their trust in the SNP government in 2007, I'm going to give a list of things that we've done. Actually, John does this very well because he takes it from when somebody's a baby and they're born with a baby box, all the benefits, but some of them, free university tuition fees. And I've lost count the number of people that said, I cannot afford £30,000 for my child to go to university. They would not be going unless the SNP had introduced and maintained free tuition fees. A massive... We've seen a massive expansion of free childcare. We've seen higher pay in Scotland for nurses, for teachers and other key public sector workers. And the Scottish Child Payment, which is contributing to keeping around 100,000 children in Scotland out of poverty. Now, that is one sentence, but it's worth thinking about. 100,000 kids that will be clothed, fed and warmed, that would not otherwise have those basic essentials. All of those policies are improving lives here in Scotland, and that's because of the choices the SNP have made. It's also because the people of Scotland have chosen the SNP. So we're using the limited powers of devolution to make life better, better for people, and also to build a better Scotland. But that ambition is constantly pulled back because we suffer from the consequences of not being independent. And it's become fashionable amongst journalists. You're not even allowed to say this is because of Westminster. Unless, of course, you're Welsh Labour, then it's all roads lead to Westminster. In Scotland, it must be the fault of the SNP. But the clue is in the word consequentials. England decides what it needs to spend on its public services, and we get some money as a consequence. Not because somebody's worked out what Scotland needs, because they've worked out what England needs, and we get money as a consequence. So there is a consequence between Westminster underfunding and the powers that we have here in trying to fund proper public services. But friends, the crucial question is, how do we achieve independence? Now, unionists will ask us that question, and they do it with a sneer, hoping that they've diverted Scotland into a constitutional dead end. They ignore all the election results, all the mandates, the ones they dislike, pretending that Scots are bound, another one of these unique rules to Scotland, bound by an arbitrary once-in-a-generation rule that they themselves can't even define. And Labour and Tory alike claim the right to decide when or if Scotland can vote on its future. And as a spoiler alert, they've decided that we can't. We will not be allowed to decide on our future. They claim at the same time to support self-determination, but how can a country truly determine its own future when the right to vote on that future is denied by another country? That is not self-determination. And this question, though, we have to concede, comes from those that support independence as well. Those who passionately support it for independence and yearn for the opportunity to vote for it. So how do we achieve that in the face of the UK's undemocratic obstinacy? Because we know that the media are not going to be confronting the UK saying, why are you being so undemocratic? It's going to be the SNP's problem, Scotland's problem, the independence movement's problem. They should be asking why they've set their face against us. But how do we move beyond that? And it strikes at the heart of our campaign for independence. And it will be my view, it's my view, and we have to have a discussion as a party as to how we achieve this. But the ability to demonstrate how we achieve independence, as well as the benefits, will be central, in my view, to the success of the 2026 election. We have to, first of all, acknowledge Westminster's stance. They've been clear. Neither Labour nor Tory will, in their words, allow the people of Scotland to choose their own future. So let's take them at their word. We have to do that. But let's also take the decision out of their hands. What is the higher power that exists, a higher power than Westminster, a higher power that stands supreme over the UK Supreme Court? The answer is simple. It's the people of Scotland, the sovereign people of Scotland. And in 2026, the people of Scotland must know, they have to believe, that supporting the SNP on a shared platform with others that support the same ideals, supporting that party gives that party, if they achieve the mandate that we seek, to advocate for independence. And it means, in my view, backing a convention of all democratically elected representatives in the Scottish Parliament, in Westminster, in councils, regardless of party. All they're required to do to join is to believe, support Scotland's right to choose. Not even independence, Scotland's right to choose. And that convention can then unite with every willing element of civic Scotland. We already know that the STU support the principle of Scotland's right to choose. Many other institutions do as well. So we have to try and encourage them to be part of that convention. And we need to demonstrate that support, the breadth and the wealth of that support, through every democratic means available. And we also, as a second part to that, have to activate the growing and very substantial international support there is for Scotland's right to self-determination. The work done by Fiona Hislop, many Scottish ministers over a number of years to talk to our friends internationally, people like, I know he's here, Alan Smith, others that have been involved in different international fora, to make sure that people understand Scotland's situation and support our right to choose. It's time, it will be time in 2026 to make sure that pays its dividends, that we get expressions of support for the democratic case for independence. And through that convention, through that international support, the third element is public support. We have to advance the opportunities for that mandate, which will be provided by getting a majority of representatives elected to Scotland's National Parliament. We have to make sure that is publicly supported. We have sometimes been a wee bit kind of reluctant in terms of marches and demonstrations, public demonstrations of support for an ideal, but many of you will remember, as I do, 1992. Scotland United, over in the Meadows, huge public demonstrations of Scotland's right to choose. We have to make sure we mobilise the public. I remember when Ian Blackford led the walkout at Westminster. We put 7,000 new members on in 2 weeks. And I went outside the Scottish Parliament because it was a spontaneous demonstration. And the number of people there that said they joined that demonstration, they joined the SNP, they had never before been involved in a political party, they just could not stand to see the way Scotland was being treated. As Stephen Flynn and his colleagues were treated by the Speaker in Westminster during the Gaza discussion. So, delegates, it's never been more important for us to persuade the majority of people in Scotland of the merits of independence. And at the election we've had, it was clear that we did not convince enough people that independence was their immediate priority, which would improve their lives. And it's up to us to change that. When Keir Starmer says things are going to get worse, he says it like it's an inevitability. And it's strange, it strikes me how it's changed from 97 when things could only get better. And now Labour's changes, things can only get worse. We know it's not inevitable that you have to accept this austerity, the poverty, the pensioner poverty, the wages suppression, all the elements of austerity which mark the UK out from other countries. We know it's not inevitable. It's a choice that the Tories made, and it's a choice that Labour are also making. Keir Starmer has said that the UK has gone to ruin. But, delegates, Scotland doesn't have to live amongst the rubble of that ruin. There is an alternative future available to us, and that future is independence. And, delegates, it's up to us in this room, the point the First Minister made earlier on today, it's up to each of us in this room to get out there and make the case together to our fellow citizens. Unlike our critics who say we're finished, the campaign for independence is not over. It has moved on to its next phase. So let's commit today to making sure that next phase is the last phase and we move to independence for our country. Thank you, delegates.
Thank you very much. Keith, you never disappoint, and I'm very pleased that the party delegates have showed their appreciation of you here today. Now, we are moving forward, colleagues. We have a number of very important and interesting amendments in front of us, so we're going to proceed with our business. The first amendment is local authority renewable energy schemes. And can I invite Derek Loudon to come and move the motion, please? Derek, you have a strict 5 minutes, please, if you can make your way to the stage. Thank you very much, Derek.
Thank you. Hello, conference. So I'm up here to move the first resolution, which is on local authority renewable energy schemes. The resolution really seeks to thank Highland Council for the development of the the Hydro Ness scheme, which sits on the River Ness. It's a new technology developed by Archimedes a couple of thousand years ago, but it's still applicable today. You know, I think if any of my ideas are still on the go 2,000 years from now, I'd be very happy. The resolution also seeks to thank Highland Council's SNP group. So I'd like to pay tribute to my colleagues in that group for the work that they've done on this scheme and on a much wider series of possible investments that we're working on. Why are we doing this? We're doing this to protect the council and the council taxpayer against potential cost increases. We're seeking to bring costs down. The technology can deliver power much more cheaply than we're currently paying. So I think that in turn is something that we should be supporting. Before they came in, Labour gave a guarantee that bills weren't going to rise under them, that electricity and gas prices would be frozen. What happened just a few days ago was that Ofgem announced that bills could go up by 10%. I don't think that is what the people of Scotland wanted when they voted in the general election. They quite clearly didn't want electricity and gas prices to rise. This shouldn't happen. But as we know, the Scottish Parliament has no control over energy prices. And what we have to make sure is that that changes in the future. We've seen in the past, in history, Scotland has done very well from renewables. We've seen the hydro schemes brought in after the 1930s, a period of austerity, and the 1940s, a period of war. But those schemes created employment and gave low bills to people in the Highlands for a long time. That was a benevolent public monopoly, something that I think we let go without really appreciating what it was doing for us. We know that Ofgem won't control prices in the interests of customers, but they do seem to be able to put them up in the interests of suppliers. So I think we need a different system. When the Russian invasion of Ukraine took place, our electricity bills doubled. And the question I'm always asking myself is that because water falling from the sky went up in price? Or did the wind insist on a higher return for blowing? Well, no, neither of those things were the case. Those are the sources of our power. They didn't go up in price at all. Why did our bills go up? Why did they go up? Why are they still going up? And why have they not come down?
1 minute.
Okay. I've one further point to make. That's in recent weeks, The Economist published a study of the richest countries on the planet. And amongst them, on one of their three measures, Norway is now the richest country on earth. We're their next door neighbours with the same resources, and we had 1 million visits to a food bank last year. Something in our polity is wrong, and it's that we don't have independence. If we have independence, we can set our own prices. If we set our own prices, we'll live in a very different nation. Conference, thank you, and support the resolution.
Conference, I have no cards to second that motion. I wonder if we have a seconder from the floor. Thank you. Thank you, sir. What's your name and where are you from? Okay, that's great. Thank you. Now, can I invite the mover of the amendment, which is... is it Francis? Right. Yes. Francis Murray from the Western Isles. Francis, if you can make your way to the stage, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Conference. I'm sure the triumphalist crowing of our national broadcaster as renewable energy began to flow from Shetland yesterday stuck in your craw as it did in mine. This Highland Council approach could not be any more different, seeking as it does to protect and empower local communities in question. In moving this amendment, we in the Western Isles seek to ensure that the benefits or otherwise of any such local authority renewable energy scheme application should be considered first and foremost in the interests of the local community. It would not make sense, in our view, for outside organisations to be able to block local renewable energy schemes if these are otherwise seen as beneficial to a local community. Any such objections could, of course, be considered as part of the planning process, but should not be privileged over the views of the community. Whilst the specific example in our amendment would obviously relate to wind developments, the principle is the same, that outside organisations should not be able to preclude developments automatically when these are of benefit to the local community, particularly in areas which are liable to longer, colder winters and extremes of weather. Please support the amendment and the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. And again, there is no card in to second the motion, so can we have a seconder from the floor? And it's the gentleman with the glasses. Okay. Okay. Right, and can I introduce the first speaker in support, and that's Faye Sinclair. Faye, make your way to the stage, please. And Kay is a councillor in Central Borders. Welcome, Faye.
Thank you. Thank you, Conference. I really welcome this resolution today, but I think key to making it work is having our local communities on board. I'm a councillor in the Scottish Borders. We have a landscape that is now dotted with lots of wind turbines. I personally really like the look of that. That's not universally shared, unfortunately. And we are seeing opposition within our communities to these large-scale developments. And I think a big part of that is because they don't see the benefit to them. We talk about community benefit when we're creating these power generation schemes, but usually that's the form of a pot of money. And once you've done up your village hall for a small rural community, there's not a lot else that you can really look to spend that on. People are not seeing a reduction in their personal bills. People are not seeing a wider benefit. I think schemes that empower local authorities and keep that money within local authorities will deliver the services that matter to them. What use is a shiny new roof on a village hall when the services around your community are being cut because public sector finances are being cut to the bone? What we need to do to get support for these schemes is to really tap into that community, have that benefit seen locally, and so I welcome this resolution. Please support. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Faye. Thank you. Can I also invite Gilbert West to come to the stage, who wishes to speak for, and Gilbert is from West Dumfries branch. Is Gilbert here? Oh, sorry, forgive me, Gilbert. You've got 3 minutes, Gilbert.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. So I definitely support this resolution very much, but I wanted to give everyone a bit of context as to why it's important. I mean, we're talking about local authorities generating their own electricity, and staying in control of cost savings, in effect. So, point number one is Scotland has one of the fastest decarbonising electricity grids in the world. Since 1990, our emissions have come down 88%, which is amazing. At the end of this year, you're going to see some headlines from the National Grid saying, oh, wind has now produced more electricity than gas for the first time ever. That actually happened this month, but in Scotland, we've been doing that. I mean, in the north of Scotland, that's been happening way before 2019. In the south of Scotland, we've been doing that since 2022. This year, north of Scotland get 76% of their electricity from wind, and down in the south of Scotland, we're approaching 60%. If you're wondering why I'm talking about north and south, it's because there are actually two grids in Scotland. We talk about the national grid, but there's actually 13 small grids. So let's have a little look. So really, if we're doing everything so well, if we're so brilliant at getting the emissions down from electricity, then why do we need to keep pushing for more renewables? So that brings me to point two. We've done this amazing job. Only about 4 or 5% of our emissions in Scotland come from generating electricity. So where does the rest come from? Where is this other 95% of emissions coming from? 28% of it comes from domestic transport. So that's our cars, our public transport and so on, not industrial transport. Another 18% comes from housing. So heating our houses, heating our buildings, gas cooking, gas central heating, all that kind of stuff. If you throw in moving fuel around the country, then that adds in another 5%. So now we're into well over 50% of our emissions coming from these three sectors. Agriculture, industry, they all add more. But, if we look at those three sectors, we can figure out what to do. Which brings me to my next point. We have to electrify all the things, essentially. If we're going to decarbonise transport, if we're going to decarbonise buildings, and if we're going to reduce the fuel supply impact, then we have to move towards electric vehicles, e-bikes replacing some car journeys, electric cooking, heat pumps in houses, refurbing houses, and so on. We have to also focus on majoring on having fuelless means of generating electricity: wind, solar, hydro, marine. And we're already brilliant at that. The offshore industry, the offshore oil industry and gas industry is fundamentally the same as maintaining wind turbines. It's a safety industry, it's an engineering industry. We are actually excellent at all of this already.
Time, please.
Okay. We could just do it by wind, but we get gold stars most of the time in Scotland for the wind production, but occasionally in summer, we're going to get a D-, which is why we need these small-scale hydro and solar schemes, not just to save money, but to level out the grid throughout the year. And you don't need to wait for the resolution. So all the councillors here, all the council employees here, just go home and do it now. Do it now.
Thank you, Gilbert. So, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have any cards speaking against the amendment. Can I, with your consent, propose to conference that the amendment is accepted by acclaim? And we are a little bit short of time, so we've got a wee bit of time to make up. There are no cards speaking against the motion as amended. So again, with the indulgence of the proposer, Derek, do you mind foregoing your right to sum up? I'm trying to see where Derek is. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That's confirmation. And can I put it to delegates that we pass the motion as amended by acclaim? Right, well done to the proposer of that motion and Francis as the proposer of the amendment. Now, we are moving on to motion number 2, which is a just transition for Scotland. I'm just going to say we have a lot of cards and interest in this, and I have a dashboard in front of me with the buttons to press. Green, you're fine. Amber, think about winding it up. Red, come on now. And then when the red starts flashing, you know, that's a big warning sign to immediately bring your remarks to a conclusion. And movers of a resolution have 5 minutes. People who are moving amendments have 3, and in terms of remit back, 3 minutes. Direct negative, 5 minutes. But I will keep you right on this. Now, Lorna, is there any more explanation I have to give before we go through motion 2? Right, okay. So, it's a great pleasure if I can welcome Alistair Allen, MSP, to propose the motion in support of resolution number 2. And Alistair is the Minister for Climate Change. Give Alistair a round of applause.
Angela agus fescar ma Charston conference. There are many opportunities for Scotland as part of the much needed, necessary transition to a cleaner energy future, both now and in the long term. We've seen the catastrophic impact of the UK government's consistent mismanagement of our energy policy and its over-reliance on gas imports amidst the instability of global gas market and the hugely costly consequences of the unit price of electricity remaining tied to gas prices. The outdated and unfair UK energy system means many households across Scotland pay far more for their energy bills than those in the south of England, despite so much of the UK's energy being generated right here. Conference, it's time Scotland made its own energy decisions to build up our economy, to lift Scots out of fuel poverty, and to achieve our net zero targets. The North Sea Basin is now at a mature stage, but remains fundamental to Scotland's current energy production landscape. It's also being used to explore geothermal energy, carbon capture, and hydrogen storage. Delivering a just energy transition means building a future for the northeast of Scotland that has a wide economic base, creating opportunities to make use of the oil and gas sector's hugely skilled workforce in transitioning to green energy industries that are already taking off. Conference, I was in Shetland recently and I saw the enormous contribution which both the Viking wind farm and increasingly Sullom Voe power are making to the energy transition. And Labour's short-sighted decision in many areas of our policy, not least in scrapping the £28 billion of green energy investment, stands in sharp contrast to all of this. That decision, experts have advised, is the very least the UK government should be spending on this, that figure, along with an energy strategy from the UK government we've seen, of course, which has threatened tens of thousands of Scottish jobs. As we all know, over £300 billion of revenue from Scotland's oil has gone straight to the UK Treasury since the 1970s. And instead of investing this wisely, or, for example, as others have done, creating an oil fund, this cash has been frittered away by successive UK governments at Westminster. Consecutive Conservative governments have failed to spend a penny in matching the Scottish Government's Just Transition Fund. So if the new UK government are willing to show a change in attitude to their predecessors, then of course the Scottish Government will work with them to bring about the changes and investment required as we move towards net zero. Ultimately, however, Conference, Scotland's energy needs need to be in Scotland's hands if we are going to make that transition to a renewable future. We have to have the power that our European neighbours take for granted, and take that power with both hands if the opportunities at our disposal are to become real. Conference, Scotland has the energy. Now let's have the power.
Thank you very much, Alistair, and well in on time. And can I now invite the seconder of the motion, Michelle Thompson, MSP, to make her way to the stage. And while Michelle's making her way to the stage, can I just indicate that we have cards in for remit back and direct negative. So if you are speaking to these matters, please ensure that you're at the front of the hall and near the stage. And with that, a very warm welcome to Michelle. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Conference. It's always wonderful to be here and to meet so many friends and long-standing colleagues, and it's a pleasure to second this motion from such a committed and articulate colleague in the Scottish Parliament. Now, we all know it's vital that we develop Scotland's capability to fully exploit and benefit from renewable energy generation and secure a just transition. And can I comment, as a member of the Scottish Parliament for Falkirk East, that Grangemouth in my constituency deserves that a great deal. The town itself never really benefited from hydrocarbons, and I will be putting my heft, and I know the Scottish Government will as well, to make sure we get a just transition for the workers and the town. So it's vital that we move as quickly as possible to independence to allow us to do so much more than we can under devolution, not least because the Labour Party has ditched its £28 billion commitment to invest. The scale of investment needed to transition to net zero and make the most of our potential is counted in the billions of pounds. And I was so pleased to see that we're going to be talking about the financing of this in the next motion. So this will only be accomplished by ensuring effective partnerships. We need to involve both the public and the private sectors collaborating together on the major investments. Now, the resolution mentions two current developments where Scottish Government funds are already helping lever significant private sector development. Ardashir Port, Haventus have already started work, and of course NIG, Sumitomo's first cable factory in Europe and the first high-voltage direct current cable factory in the UK is being established, and that will create hundreds of jobs. However, we also need to address directly the current major sources of demand for carbon-emitting fuels. We know central heating is a problem for around a third of our greenhouse gas output. Switching carbon-emitting natural gas for hydrogen, which doesn't produce carbon when it burns, is one of the ways that we can keep homes and businesses warm and safe whilst making progress in our fight against the climate emergency. Here again, Scotland leads via the H100 project. In Buckhaven, in Fife, a world-first hydrogen network is being developed, and that will bring renewable hydrogen into 300 homes by next summer and providing zero carbon fuel for heating and cooking. The Scottish Government is contributing public investment here alongside the private sector. So much more needs to be done though. And let me remind you, as if we needed reminding, it will be so much easier to do this when we're independent. We can have our voice on the world stage and lead this global change. Please support the motion.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And can I invite Duncan Gill, who is going to speak to the remit back. And let's welcome Duncan to the stage.
Like Conference, I'm asking you to remit back this resolution because I do not think it represents a truly just transition for Scotland. In this resolution, the primary beneficiaries of Scotland's natural resources are corporations rather than the people who live here. It seems to want a repeat of how oil and gas has been exploited over the last 50 years, rather than a change of approach. It's only a change of energy generated. I'm from the North East. Aberdeen's oil and gas jobs are crucial to our neck of the woods. The resolution references those huge numbers, and those numbers are an accumulation of individuals with their families and all the people who their lives are intermeshed with. The numbers are more than numbers. We know and understand that. I know the importance of employment as part of a just transition. However, who is doing the employing and to what end is more important. We must lift our eyes and see the whole picture. Not only the energy workers feel fearful for their future, we must see everyone from these generations and the generations to come. A just transition should be about what we leave those who follow us, and that should be more than jobs. The resolution talks of Scotland's energy. Well, contrary to the old slogan, it was only ever Scotland's oil when it was in the ground, when it was potential energy. If this resolution becomes our policy, the renewable energy generated here will only ever have been potentially Scotland's. When the potential is realised, it belongs to others, just like oil and gas. When the turbines have turned and the batteries have charged, the energy is Vattenfall's or Equinor's or EDF's. Pick your foreign direct investor of choice. Conference. We know the aims of this party, our party, are from the Constitution, 1A, independence for Scotland, and 1B, the furtherance of all Scottish interests. How does it further Scottish interests to sell control of energy production and distribution? This resolution mentions huge sum of money oil and gas companies have paid to the Treasury, but it doesn't mention those companies were willing to pay that and more because they're making a fortune. The companies now paying for leases for offshore wind sites and putting money in renewables projects aren't doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. Conference. We know that in 2014, Scotland had power for one day, one little day, and decided to entrust that power to others. Are we, the SNP, really going to pass a resolution that if we had the power, we'd entrust Scotland's energy to others? We owe it to the people who live here and the people who will live here to pass a resolution that would result in energy generated in Scotland actually, truly being Scotland's energy. Please vote to remit this back.
Thank you, Duncan. Can I ask the conference floor if there is a seconder for the remit back? Okay, thank you very much for that. And can I now invite the proposer of the direct negative, which is Roland Chaplin. Roland, if you can make your way to the stage, please. Welcome, Roland. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. Conference. Many of you probably know already, but for those who don't, at both the last national councils, there have been motions about just transition. In each case, they were remitted back. The vote was won for a remit back. Duncan and I were both involved in that remit back. This time, I'm voting for direct negative and calling on you all to do so for a very specific reason, that many of you, after the remit back at National Council, came up to me and said, at last, we're beginning to have real debate in this party. That is hugely important. And you have the chance for real debate today, and I'm delighted that so many people have put cards in to speak for this, and I hope also for the second motion. But you have a choice of two directions, and this is where it relates to independence. It is what sort of Scotland you want to see once we are independent. Are you wanting to have business as normal, where the big corporates, as was pointed out to us so clearly by Duncan, are the beneficiaries? Do you want Scotland's natural capital to continue to be asset stripped on a massive scale? Do you want the pressure on our elected representatives from the fossil fuel industries, which is ruthless? It's happening to governments every part of the world, to go on. Or do you want an alternative? My suggestion is that in motion 3, you are laying the groundwork for that alternative. But motions number 2 and motions number 3 are mutually exclusive. I believe you can only vote for one and to vote against the other. And that is why I'm calling on you to vote against motion 2, because it's motion 3 that gives us a chance for this to become a reality, where Scotland's natural assets are not being stolen by big corporate interests, shareholder interests, and this global attempt by the fossil fuel industries to perpetuate the level of profits they're making at the present time. And if I may just finally make a little plug for something that's very important. We're doing a fringe meeting on Sunday morning. It is about civic society. You remember Keith Brown spoke of civic society. And what he means here, and they are actually the route, I believe, to independence, is we are calling for policy, the policy that is put on behalf of all of us, the sovereign people of Scotland, to be in our hands, and that is through all the bodies of civic society, because I believe that the political processes are being corrupted so much by the worst possible forms of pressure. It's more than just old-fashioned lobbying. And I believe that there is a strength in civil society having the decisions spread through it. So all the policies relating to citizens' assemblies, so forth, should be applied to determining this very complex issue of what should be an independent Scotland's form of just transition. It's far more than just the little bits of nitty-gritty we've heard from the proposers of this motion. I call on you, therefore, please support both our fringe meeting on COP30 and how it can be the first ever People's COP, which is on Sunday morning, and reject this motion. It is dangerous. Don't let the people who are asset stripping Scotland have a free card to continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Now, can I invite Alex Kerr, who wishes to speak for the motion, to make his way to the stage, please? And after we have heard from Alex, we will hear from Kathleen Byron, who will speak against the motion. Over to you, Alex. You've got 3 minutes.
I'll keep it in time, don't worry. Thank you, Convener, and thanks to Alistair Allen and Michelle Thompson for bringing this resolution. I'm delighted to see the resolution call for the devolution of energy powers to Scotland. I'm proud that Scotland has led the way on renewable development through offshore and onshore wind, solar, and we are set to be on the edge of new innovative technologies like tidal, floating wind and carbon capture. But with all that success, how can it be, Conference, that in a country so unbelievably rich with energy potential, that bills are set to soar for people living in Scotland? Another broken promise from Keir Starmer. We know all too well how Westminster squandered Scotland's oil boom and left our country poorer for it. Are we really going to let them do the same with their renewables boom? Once again, the Westminster establishment intends to use Scotland's resources to prop up their failed economic and political system. And you don't have to just believe me. Greg Jackson, CEO of Octopus Energy, stated that Scotland could experience periods of free electricity if Ofgem changed its outdated and broken regulations. It is high time we take control of our own resources, of our own future. The Westminster parties have had their fun at Scottish voters' expense, but at some point the subsidies to them must stop. The only people that can be trusted to invest properly in the just transition that Scotland requires are the people who live and work here. It was Scotland's oil then. Let's make sure we do not make the same mistake with Scotland's power now. Please support the motion, Conference.
Thank you very much, Alex. And can I invite Kathleen Byron to the stage? Kathleen's from the Craig and Tinney and Duddingston branch. Warm welcome to you, Kathleen.
Hi. I was originally just going to say one thing. It's like, this is asking Westminster to do stuff. What's the point? We're just shouting into the wind. But after hearing Roland, who said that what was it? The direct negative, I want to support him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Right, friends, we're moving to the sum up. So if I can invite Duncan back to sum up for the remit back.
Hi, so we've had a lot of talk so far about how Scotland's energy should be in Scotland's hands from the proposers of the motions, but none of them have suggested a national energy company or efforts to better facilitate community ownership as part of retaining that power. I think it's one of the reasons that I wanted to remit it back that I didn't get in first time. And finally, Voltaire said, "Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good." I don't think this resolution is by any means perfect, and I don't think Labour and Tories down the road are even close to good. But that doesn't mean that we should settle for just doing a wee bit better than them. So I'll conclude by saying just remit this back and come up with a resolution that actually serves the people of Scotland. Thanks.
Thank you, Duncan. And can I invite Roland Chaplin back on stage to sum up for the direct negative? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Roland. And therefore, can I invite Alistair Allen back up to sum up for the motion?
Thank you, Conference. I've listened with a great deal of care to what's been said by the many speakers today, or the number of speakers today. I just want to say something in general first about direct negatives and remit backs, or remits back might be the plural. If you feel there are things that are not in a motion, a resolution that you feel should be there, I think that's a case for amendment rather than knocking back a resolution, is the first thing I would say. But if there are concerns that people have, I really need to address them quite directly. I do not accept the idea, for instance, that community energy and commercial energy are mutually exclusive for Scotland. And I think that we're going to need them both. And we certainly can't make a just transition to the future without engaging the private sector as well. I think that what I would say is that by either remitting this back or by voting it down, I think I would just want to make Conference aware of what it is actually, or would be, voting against or kicking into the long grass. And I just read from the resolution again. Conference believes that the north east of Scotland can become the net zero capital of the world and welcomes a just transition that invests in green technology and creates good skilled jobs. Conference notes that the expansion of Scotland's renewable energy sector is one of the greatest export opportunities Scotland will ever have. I think, Conference, we should grasp these opportunities with both hands. And I also really just want to say that this is an opportunity to show our faith in Scotland's energy potential for the future, and not, as one of the speakers said, to ask for things for Westminster, but as the resolution does, to demand them.
Thank you. Right, now we're proceeding to the voting. Our first vote is with reference to the remit back. So for delegates who want to vote for the remit back, please raise your cards visibly. Cards down. And for those who are voting against the remit back, please show your cards visibly. Okay, please bear with us. We're going to need to do that again because we are going to need to count. So before I ask people to put their arms up again, I'm just going to check that our stewards and counters are in place. And I'll just wait on the nod that everybody's in place. Hope you all had your ready break this morning. Who says attending conference was passive? Right. Just bear with us till we check that everybody's in place. Right, we're good to go. So once again, all of those in favour of who are for the remit back, please raise your cards visibly and keep your hand up till the counting proceeds. It's really hard to judge, isn't it?
I think the remit back's going to fall only slightly on the second view.
So better check it.
Definitely was too close to call.
Yeah.
And I think if we hadn't called it, somebody for the floor would have called it. It was far too. Right, we're good.
Okay, you can rest your arms. And for those who wish to vote against the remit back, please raise your arm visibly and keep it up. Cards down. So just bear with us. We'll get the result to you as soon as possible. Okay, delegates, thank you for your patience. The result of the vote is 157 for the remit back and 202 against the remit back. So that means we now proceed to the vote on the direct negative. So can I see cards raised for those who want to vote for the direct negative? Okay, cards down, please. And can I ask those who wish to vote against the direct negative to raise their cards? Okay, cards down, conference. That's pretty clear that conference has voted against the direct negative. We are moving on to our next round of voting. So those who are in favour, who want to vote for the resolution, please raise your cards now. Okay. Hands down, please. And those who wish to vote against the resolution, please raise your hand. Hands down. Hands down, colleagues. So again, that was pretty clear. The resolution is passed. Thank you very much. Who's next? So we're moving on to the third resolution in our session, Financing a Just Transition. And can I invite the mover of the resolution to come forward, and that's Chris Hanlon from West Fife and Coastal Village. Chris, if you make your way to the stage, please. Thank you, Chris. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Conference. I suppose you're wondering what this resolution is all about. It, like many of the 1,000 or so resolutions I've read in 6 years on Conference Committee, is essentially political word salad. Sorry. My job here is to try to explain its intentions and to try to ease any doubts you might have about the details. One of my favourite videos on YouTube is of a crow being presented with a challenge. It's given a bottle that is almost full of water. It can't tip it over, and the surface of the water is further from the top of the bottle than the length of the crow's beak. Crows are surprisingly smart, and what a crow will do is find some little stones that fit through the neck of that bottle and drop them in it until they displace the water enough for the crow to reach the water without growing a longer beak. We need to stop trying to grow a longer beak. The Scottish Parliament at Holyrood has carte blanche under the powers granted to it by the Scotland Act to pass legislation to raise revenues to fund local authorities in Scotland. Now, a significant proportion of Holyrood's budget goes to funding local authorities. Every pound that local authorities can raise on their own is a pound that Holyrood does not need to send them, and that could be spent on other priorities at a national level. By displacing the central funding for councils, you raise the water level and you can get your beak wet without growing a longer one. Holyrood could even place a levy on councils for collecting the taxes for them and eventually entirely cut the apron strings to the UK Exchequer. Doing so would enable us to revolutionise our attitude to taxation in Scotland. It would put Holyrood completely in control of deciding what its budget is and how it is raised. Right now, that is absolutely critical because, make no mistake, Rachel Reeves intends to throttle Scotland financially until we stop kicking and elect a Labour government in Holyrood. But beyond that, we only have about 10 years to fundamentally transform our economy to meet the challenge of the climate crisis and to seize the economic opportunities it will present to us. Taxation will be a massively effective tool in achieving that objective, and having more control in the hands of our government in Holyrood over where we place the burden of taxation in our society will be a massive advantage for Scotland. Now, we will talk about this more in some detail, I'm sure, in the next resolution that has been brought by the Trade Union Group. But I felt it was important enough to devote much of my time to emphasising that this is the sort of bold, ambitious policy proposal that will inspire the voting public to give us an unprecedented fifth term at Holyrood, if we have the courage to grasp it and to run with it. We have already made a good start with the recently published National Performance Framework on beginning to reshape our economy into a well-being economy that is not obsessed with one outdated metric of success. But what we lack, what we really need to inspire the people of Scotland is a mission. Something bold, something ambitious, and something that raises our eyes towards the stars once again. The recent work published by economists Mariana Mazzucato, Laurie McFarlane and the Future Economy Society and Future Economy Scotland, examining how Scotland can transform its economy, has shown us a way forward, and we should seize the opportunity they have revealed to us to do what UK Labour are too conservative to do. All three concrete proposals in this resolution are directed at that end. We should help crowd in private sector investment by working with our financial sector to create truly ethical financial products and business models that will encourage the tens of billions of pounds that are currently invested by Scottish institutions to flow into funding a just transition for Scotland. In particular, we need to capitalise a number of properly licensed green investment banks to use the leverage they will have to magnify the impact of that capital on Scotland's economic transformation. Secondly, we should mandate public bodies in Scotland to use a metric we develop that accurately values the investments they are making based on their long-term environmental impact. We should empower public pension funds with the tools they need to divest from industries that are destroying our planet. There's no point any of us having a pension fund if it destroys the economy before we're old enough to retire. And thirdly, we should also pass Resolution 4 and develop a coherent package of taxation proposals that we can present to next year's Citizens' Assembly on Local Authority funding reform as our vision of how Scotland's public services should be funded going forward. And in doing so, in advance of the 2026 Holyrood election, differentiate our offering completely from the weak sauce, neoliberal mumbo-jumbo that is coming from the opposition parties. Thank you very much.
Could I invite David Hood to come and second the resolution? And again, David is from West Fife and Coastal Villages branch. David, if you can make your way to the stage, please. And just to say, we're are a little bit pressed for time now, so if the next speaker who wishes to speak against, Jean Maxwell, and there's another speaker, Lynn Jardine, who wants to speak for, if you can make your way so that you're in proximity to the stage. Okay, David, over to you, 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. There's not much I can add to what Chris has eloquently done there. It's a terrific resolution, I must say, because it's ours, of course, at West Fife. And in fact, I'm one of those people who actually went on holiday and came back as the constituency convener. That's what John was saying earlier on. Anyway, great speech, John, by the way, earlier on this morning. I've got to take my hat off to him. It was terrific, just what we needed. Chris has eloquently, as I say, put forward the case for this. And I think it means that we can start to navel gaze a little, because we're financing a just transition, and we keep forgetting about the just part. I mean, we're quite happy, or not so happy, but we put up with Ofgem basically leading a cartel, because that's what they are. And there's all these things about the just transition that kind of forgets that it just means it's connected to everything. You know, a just transition is everything. It's not just energy, it's not just the great robbery, the great energy robbery that continues since, God, for decades now. But it's a human rights issue as well, because it has to be a just transition, because we're trying to protect our assets, our environment, our future. So it's a human rights issue. And that came to mind at the earlier Fringe meeting that I went to today. And it's also asserting our sovereignty if we have a just transition, i.e. we're not putting up with others' view of what their transition is, which is completely kleptocratic and parasitic. So we need, and Chris mentioned that earlier, that we need different metrics. I mean, if you look at the Prosperity Index globally, all the Nordic countries come out better than Scotland, and they certainly come out better than the UK. And the question has been raised earlier on as to why not us. Now, a lot of the reservations that were put up earlier on about this, about the previous resolution, I think are met in this resolution in some way. And looking back at the proper metrics, we have to have metrics that show ambition. They have to measure what should be measured. They have to be more tangible. They have to result in, as was said earlier on, in people's lives getting better, their power bills going down. So we have to have these things, and we have to make it more attainable. And it has to change lives, better lives. And all those metrics must lead to better lives and a well-being metrics rather than GDP or whatever. So let's just show what just transition actually looks like, what it enables. People need a pathway, let's give them it. And the choice we've got is a just transition or unjust transmission. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Can I invite Jean Maxwell to come and speak against? Three minutes, Jean.
Yep. I'll be as quick as I can. Conference, good afternoon. And I'd like to thank Chris for summing up his motion there quite nicely. Word salad. I think you got it right, Chris. We've had 10 paragraphs here, a large chunk of which is about this strange coefficient which is to be developed, and a lot of other nice words, but it's apple pie. There's no detail to it. Yes, they're lovely words, but they don't mean much. The key one that worries me, though, that really worries me, is the bit where it says, call on the Scottish Government to encourage private sector to create innovative and ethical investment vehicles to better direct the vast investment resources domestically within Scotland. That sounds good as well. But I'll remind you, 53% of the entire UK stock market is owned overseas. There was mention there of pension funds and them disinvesting and so on. Pension funds own 1.8% of the UK share market. They're not big investors. This has almost no impact. What has an impact is the previous motion that we voted for, which says, urges the UK government to devolve energy powers to Scotland. Not tinkering around the edges with making the civil servants write some nice new coefficients, which they will design so they fit the project that they're working on. Not some nice green bank in the corner that's some small percentage of the actual investment. We need much more than that. This is not... I'm sorry, I cannot vote for this, and I would urge conference not to vote for this. It means nothing and delivers nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. Now, can I invite Lynn Jardine, who is a councillor in East Lothian, onto the stage to speak for the resolution, please. Over to you, Lynn. You've got 3 minutes and the floor is now yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, conference. I'm here to provide you with an example of how this motion's call for a taxation regime could provide a very valuable funding stream which could hopefully level out a bit the playing field within truly transitional, just transition. I'm privileged to represent Dunbar and East Linton, one of Scotland's most beautiful and energy-rich wards. Between the coastline and the A1, there's an industrial landscape, including a quarry, cement works, energy recovery plant, and a nuclear power station, with several onshore wind farms to the south. Sandwiched in between is a beautiful countryside, rich in both food production and biodiversity. Off the coast, emerging offshore wind projects, which the community are generally supportive of, despite some negative experiences from their onshore development. Over the last couple of years, I've witnessed a gold rush of energy development in this countryside zone. Since approval of onshore grid connections for the largest offshore wind farm in Europe at Berwick Bank, there's been a boom of associated projects, in addition to the ongoing wind farm developments onshore. Battery storage and solar farms are the latest trend, with hydrogen likely to follow when it's viable. These projects sit within one locality of around 600 households. A small, dedicated group of resident experts and volunteers are looking out for everyone's best interests, both people and planet. At the same time, East Lothian Council has been inundated through planning, infrastructure and economic development, with a significant drain on already pressed resources. Both community and council must wade through vast amounts of documentation, seeking to provide the most relevant evidence to decision makers, seeking to explain how best to protect the diversity and sustainability of the landscape, the well-being of the community, as well as enabling essential development. There are currently 14 projects in various stages of development and indications of a further offshore wind farm even larger than Berwick Bank, which will also require an onshore grid facility. To say that everyone's resilience is being tested would be an absolute understatement. Too many individuals are experiencing significant levels of stress and anxiety, and the workload on top is extreme. To be fair, a couple of developers are well engaged, supporting the community to build their own resources and put in place mediations for traffic management and biodiversity considerations. But that's an exception, not the rule. Communities such as East Lammermuir, mostly in rural areas across Scotland, need and deserve our support to ensure energy developments aren't done to them, they're done with them. We need mechanisms to ensure energy developers' resources are safeguarding the well-being of communities during planning and delivery, as well as a slice of financial benefits. I humbly ask you to support the motion.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you. Can I check with the mover of the resolution, Chris Hanlon, whether or not he's content to forgo his summing up or whether he wishes to exercise that opportunity or not? You're going to come up? Okay. Over to you, Chris. Thank you.
I'll be brief. Firstly, to deal with the objections, public sector pension funds in Scotland have tens of billions under investment. It might be a small amount, but it's a lot more than the Scottish Government has to spend on a just transition. This resolution asks the Scottish Government to do three things in the service of a fourth overarching and more important objective. That objective is to give us and the Scottish Government a wake-up call, a bucket of cold water over the head, and to reset our attitude toward taxation and the raising of revenue. Even to think about how to use taxation creatively to disincentivise economic activity we want to discourage. To stop looking to London for an economic model to replicate and start looking to Oslo, Stockholm, Copenhagen and Helsinki. With one small exception that I might bring another resolution about later, the Scottish Government, prior to independence, can only spend what it can raise in taxation, plus the generous pocket money we get from Westminster, that is paid out of the taxes taken by the UK from the wealth our economy generates. Now, I'm sure that you've all noticed that the disaster of Brexit and the transition to a UK Labour government run by a neoliberal fiscal hawk in the shape of Rachel Reeves has been and will continue to be an evolving disaster for the Scottish Government's budget. The purpose of this resolution is to call for the Scottish Government to put down the begging bowl, to stop tugging its forelock and to stop saying, please sir, can I have some more? We should stand up proud, stop subsisting on the scraps that Westminster deigns to cast in our direction and take charge of raising our own revenues. We should start acting like an independent nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for all the speakers in that debate. Can I now put to delegates that all those in favour of the resolution to please raise your cards and to do so now visibly and clearly. Thank you very much. I think you put your hands down now. And can I ask those who are voting against the resolution to raise their cards now and visibly, please? Okay, thank you very much. You can take your hands down. Thank you very much for your patience. That's very clear that overwhelmingly the resolution is passed. So thank you. Now, colleagues, fortunately time has ran away with us. We have a lot of cards in for resolution for the effective use of tax powers. So I intend to take that resolution at the first opportunity that we can tomorrow so that we can have a proper debate in and around this substantial resolution. My apologies about that, and apologies to those that are primed already to get up and speak, but we will return to the matter tomorrow, I can assure you of that. The next session that we are that's now upon us, delegates, is the first of our interactive policy sessions. The First Minister, supported by the National Executive Committee, was very clear that at our annual conference that we should have the opportunity to be engaging through discourse party members with respect to policy, and therefore the opportunity was created for ministers and people of various portfolios within government to make presentations to conference. And with that in mind, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Kate Forbes, who is the Deputy First Minister and Economy Secretary. Kate is going to speak to us for about 10 minutes and then she will introduce other Cabinet Secretaries who are here to support her in this very important discussion that she will lead with you all today. And over to you, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Fesgyrma Conference, it is wonderful to be here. And we meet in Edinburgh at the International Conference Centre, which is a fitting venue for a party which looks outward, which is internationalist, and which still says, "Stop the world, Scotland wants to get on." Because, conference, we are united in the knowledge that Scotland has everything it takes to be a successful, prosperous and independent nation. We have the people, we have the resources, and we have the opportunities. This month alone, our capital city hosted thousands of international visitors for the world's largest festival of arts and culture. And across the country, visitors came in great numbers to enjoy our nation, our breathtaking natural beauty, our delicious food and drink, and our incredible people. You know, conference, sometimes I think if we would only see ourselves as others see us, there would be no place for doom and gloom, the doom and gloom that characterises our debate about our economy in the public square. Take just a few of our world-leading sectors. Our food and drink is enjoyed across the world, and our exports continue to grow. We may only have 8% of the UK's population, but Scottish whisky forms 25% of the UK's exports, and Scottish fish and seafood continues to top the list as well. In fact, there's been a 200% growth in food exports over the last 10 years from Scotland, and the industry is worth a whopping £15 billion. Scottish resource, Scottish talent enjoyed by the world. But the EU is, of course, we all know, the most important market for our exports, which is why it remains utterly irrational that the UK government's only contribution to those figures has been to take us out of the single market, to add bureaucracy and red tape, and to wipe millions of pounds off the value of our exports. Labour's so-called real change is no change at all, with no prospect of undoing that damage. But from food and drink through to energy, we know, and we've just heard the debates, that we are spoiled with an incredible abundance of natural resources. A twice-blessed nation, you could say. Decades ago, Scotland's oil and gas powered the nation, and now it's our renewables that are keeping the lights on. Our wealth of renewables means that Scotland should be offering Europe's cheapest power, according to Greg Jackson, the Chief Executive of Octopus Energy. But only if the UK government reforms the energy market and fixes regulation. And I have a suspicion that we'll be waiting an awfully long time for that to happen. Meanwhile, energy prices rocket. In fact, remember that real change that I think Labour were offering? Well, that real change turns out that they are overseeing the energy price cap rise by almost 10%. And if that wasn't enough, they're also scrapping universal winter fuel payments. So their vision for Scotland is that in this energy-rich country, they're making Scots colder and poorer this winter. As the world decarbonises, it'll be Scotland's natural, abundant resources, talent base and reputation in the energy industry that makes us so well placed to attract new jobs and investment. And the figures do speak for themselves. You don't often hear these figures, but last year, for the 9th year, Scotland was again the top destination for foreign investment in the UK outside of London. Turns out, again, remember those people that see ourselves slightly differently from the way that we see ourselves? Well, they want to invest. They look at Scotland and they say great opportunity. They see great industries, great workers. They're putting their money into Scottish businesses, into the Scottish economy, and the stats are clear. The investment will increase in Scotland at a faster rate than in Europe or the rest of the UK. We have also got, alongside that, the third highest wages, and last year earnings in Scotland grew faster than any other part of the UK. I suggest that's a record to be proud of. Delegates, we have resources and advantages that other already successful small countries would love to have. A booming food and drink sector, universities and colleges that are envied the world over, a renewable sector which is powering our homes and businesses. But building on that, the July election made clear that voters highlight the economy as one of their top priorities. And they want to see a vision for our economy that takes us to net zero. They want a break from all the many economic pressures of inflation, higher costs, a break from the all-consuming, multi-generational cycle of poverty that is a scourge on our society. And they want a vision that recognises the importance of fairness, that wages should cover costs, that jobs should be secure and fair, and that our industries should deliver benefits for our communities. And as Deputy First Minister with responsibility for the economy, working alongside my colleagues on an SNP manifesto, that is what I want to deliver before 2026. My objectives and the objectives of the SNP government is to use our limited economic levers with every fibre of our being to deliver that, to attract more investment, to create routes out of poverty alongside our fairer social security system, and to put communities and workers front and centre of our economic agenda. How do we do that? Well, firstly, our economic policy is to ensure that we have a purpose. Our economic policy is to create economic prosperity that recognises it isn't an end in and of itself. Our purpose is to support our people. Prosperity with a purpose. That purpose is to achieve net zero and to meet our climate change targets. That purpose is to build more affordable homes and better infrastructure. That purpose means that our supply chain prioritises small businesses, creating more jobs in our small towns and villages. That purpose is to enrich communities, not just stakeholders. The way that we do our business matters as much as the business that we do. Secondly, we need to lift our heads and to recognise that we operate on a global stage. We compete internationally for investment, and we're determined to win that investment. In other words, we are ambitious to make Scotland the most attractive place to live, to work, and to invest. We all know that our public finances are under incredible strain. If we hoped for that real change Labour were offering, we're already pretty disappointed. And so that's all the more reason to attract investment and to ensure that across the world, Scotland is recognised as a place to start or to grow a business, to create jobs and to create wealth. In other words, Scotland is open for business. And we want to make clear to investors what to expect in Scotland, to shorten the waiting times for planning and consenting without compromising our key expectations, to regulate in a coherent and a consistent way, to get all the arms of economic development working together, so that when someone expresses interest in investing, we work with them, highlighting what is required, who to speak to, and how to navigate the public sector. We want to highlight our priorities, which is to invest in the just transition, to invest in renewables, to invest in the supply chain, and to support our communities taking a stake in those opportunities as well. The third and the most important conference is to recognise that our people are everything. Our workers are at the heart of our economic policy, and they must be paid fair wages with fair terms and conditions and have access to the best skills and training. Now, we've already made great strides in becoming a fair work nation, so that people know when they invest in Scotland or build a business in Scotland, we expect them to treat workers fairly. And for a country with a population of 5 million people, with a long history of immigration, we value immigration and the many, many people that choose to come here and make a positive contribution. Because, conference, today we say together that we wholeheartedly reject the way that immigrants are denigrated in our public discourse, and there is no place for that in Scotland. Conference, we will fight for a fair, coherent immigration system. And in this period before independence, the Labour government must work with us to devolve immigration policy or deliver a Scotland-only visa. Conference, I am in no doubt that the last few years of inflation, rising costs, poor living standards have been challenging. But let's make no mistake about that. The UK economy has been characterised by low growth, low productivity, low levels of investment and high levels of inequality for much, much longer. It doesn't work for Scotland or for our communities. You just ask the pensioners who have been stripped of the winter fuel payments whilst living next door to Europe's energy capital. And you only need to consider comparable independent countries to see the huge opportunities for Scotland. Countries like Norway, Finland and Sweden, they enjoy higher productivity and living standards, higher levels of investment and lower inequality than the UK. Maybe that's because countries of our size are well suited to the kind of agility and collaboration that's necessary in this fast-changing, technology-driven economic world. Maybe we'd be more prosperous as an independent nation. Now, Scotland doesn't have all the powers that those countries enjoy, but we have something else. We have determination, we have ambition, and we have compassion to make the Scottish economy as fair and competitive as it possibly can be for the benefit of every person in Scotland and every community. And so, conference, as I close, I want to thank you for all your input into our economic policies and agenda. The prize is huge, and we work together to ensure that the SNP always stands up for Scotland and has a clear vision for the people of Scotland, that if you want a party that will deliver fairness, a party that will deliver prosperity, and a party that sees the opportunity more than anybody else will, It's the SNP. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy First Minister. It appears that your speech went down like a treat, so thank you for that. Now, I know that Mary Goujon can't be with us today because she's got some urgent government business, and of course Mary McCallan is on maternity leave, having seen the safe delivery of her son, and I'm sure we'll all send our best wishes to Mary McCallan and her family in that regard. So, and I know the two Cabinet Secretaries to the right of the platform, my West Lothian friend and colleague, Fiona Hislop, Cabinet Secretary for Transport, and Gillian Martin, who is covering for Mary McCallan's maternity leave, have joined the Deputy First Minister. And the Deputy First Minister is going to lead a discussion with our colleagues with regards to what their immediate priorities are, and I think they'll both speak for a few minutes, and then we have some questions from the audience that have been presented in front of me. So over to you, Deputy First Minister, and your colleagues.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Hopefully that works. And I will put some questions to Fiona Hislop and Gillian Martin about what we're doing already in the economy space, but perhaps what else we could do if we were able to. So perhaps, Fiona, if I could start with you. What, right now, within your own brief as Cabinet Secretary for Transport, are your own 3 top priorities at the moment? And what are the 3 things that you wish you could do if you could?
Okay. Thanks very much, Kate, and for providing that strong direction for our economic policy. Transport, of course, underpins the economy, both for individuals, communities, and for our wider national interests. So my key priorities are, I would characterise them as people, place, and decarbonising for our planet. On people, remember, it was the SNP government that brought in rail into public ownership and control in 2022. And as the UK government catches up, my job is to make sure that we underpin that public ownership and control by right, not just because we're our operator of last resort. And I'm also going to make sure that GB Rail does not mean a step forward for the UK rail system and a step back for Scotland. I want to make sure that the combination of rail, of track and train that we initiated as an innovation here in Scotland can be promoted to ensure the investment that we need. And clearly, much of that will also be about climate change, adaptation, and that decarbonisation plan for the rest of our railways. We've already done Barrhead, we're already doing Edinburgh, and remember, it was us, as in government, who made sure we had built the Airdrie-Bathgate line, and also the Borders Rail line, and the recently opened Leavenmouth Railway as well. Also on people, I'll be making sure that our direct award for CalMac, people recognise the service of the frontline staff in CalMac, and I want their energies focused on delivering a direct award so they're operating an improved service as opposed to operating to contract. I'm not waiting for the direct award. We've already seen an enhancement and change plan with regionalisation and responsiveness to local communities. 6 new major ferries for 2026, 7 more small vessels procured. On place, the A9 is the backbone of Scotland, and we have already put the tender in operation for Tomatin Tomoy. There'll be work on that started very soon, and we're out to tender on Tay Crossing to Ballanoog. From now on, there'll be continuous work delivering the A9 dualling as promised. On decarbonisation, we're investing in low-emission buses. We're making sure that our young people get used to working and going to work and doing all their work, their study, etc., using buses with our under-22 free bus pass, which will be maintained and which has seen 150 journeys recorded this week. And we're also using that energy that we're producing to make sure we've got an extensive array of EV chargers right across Scotland. And then finally, what would I want to do differently? Well, do you know, if we were members of the European Union as an independent state, we could be part of Eurofema to invest in our rail fleet services. We could have better safety standards on our EV cars. And most importantly of all, the independence that we have would be able to transform our transport system with real investments as independent states can do, liberating that fiscal constraint and building that better Scotland that you and I know can exist with independence for our people.
Thanks so much, Fiona. Now, Gillian, as Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero and Energy, those two subjects have dominated a lot of the debates. So perhaps you could outline some of the things that you're doing currently and perhaps some of the things that you wish you could.
So I have always been of the belief that Scotland's energy, can you hear me now? Yeah, that Scotland's energy is actually the case for independence. We heard from the Deputy First Minister that we've been twice blessed. Now, we've been blessed with oil and gas for the last 50 years, and we all know what has happened there. Yes, it's provided people with very well-paying jobs. It's, you know, enhanced the region that I'm from and the North East, but it hasn't really served the whole of Scotland. The whole of Scotland should have benefited from the tax receipts and the profits of oil and gas. Now, the second blessing is our renewable potential. We are already doing extremely well in renewables, but we need to make sure that this time the whole of Scotland benefits. Now, thank you. Now, we have already made sure that when we put out the options for ScotWind licences, that we had conditions built in that were about local procurement and local supply chain, which will mean that Scottish businesses really benefit from that activity. But I want us to go further, because as an independent nation, the profits and the inward investment that's coming into Scotland would be for the benefit of the people of all of Scotland. We wouldn't have a situation where we have a disagreement on the transmission of our electricity infrastructure if every person in Scotland thought that they were going to effectively have much lower fuel bills, if there was no such thing as fuel poverty in Scotland. Scotland and the north of Wales are the most fuel-poor parts of the UK by some way. The Highlands are even more fuel-poor than any other part of Scotland. Yet it's the Highlands and the north east that are actually generating most of the renewable electricity. Now, you asked what I'm doing. Well, a lot of the things in the energy and the net zero space have to require a lot of collaboration with the government that holds quite a lot of the levers in this place. But I caught the very last part of the debate. Sorry I didn't hear all the speeches on the motions around renewable energy. But I have to say that I absolutely fundamentally agree that we shouldn't be going cap in hand for dribs and drabs of regulations and flexibility here and there, here and then. We should be absolutely putting our colours, nailing our colours to the mast, that we want to see Scotland's energy working for the people of Scotland. In the net zero space, I am very conscious of the risk that getting to net zero can look like a burden, too much of a challenge, and something that may disadvantage people. I want to turn that narrative around. Getting to net zero for Scotland is the biggest economic opportunity that we will have in our lifetime. It will be bigger than oil and gas if we get it right. It will connect us to the rest of the world in a way that our skills and our diaspora will be producing our floating offshore wind, the largest floating offshore wind projects that the world has ever seen. And we will, like we did with oil and gas and many other skills, we will be going to the rest of the world and helping other nations develop that renewable energy and playing more than a significant part in getting climate change addressed across the world. What we need to be able to really think about is, yes, there are challenges in the amount of infrastructure that's going to have to go out there. There are challenges in what we do with our land, but we have to look to the potential for what we can achieve out of that. However, it comes back to the fundamental point that we don't want to be doing that in a fiscal regime that benefits the people who don't live here, the people who don't work here, the people that need to see the benefits coming to their communities, that want to see us being like Denmark, like Norway, that wants to see us having a sovereign wealth fund that's actually going to be coming from our economic activity and providing security into the future for our pensioners, for our children, and for everyone, and lifting people out of poverty. There's some really big themes in there, but I come back to the fundamental point is that net zero is an opportunity that we must seize, and it is the opportunity also for the next independence referendum to put the case for Scotland's economic prosperity front and centre.
Thanks so much, Gillian. That certainly does sound like a manifesto for independence. So, Angela, back over to you.
Thank you very much, DFM. We have some time in hand for some questions that have been submitted from delegates. And I think the first one may, not exclusively, but principally be for you, DFM, where it is, the question is from Stephen Shilton from the Hamilton branch, where he says that polling and other research has shown that voters are more likely to support independence when economic growth is defined in a framework of the well-being economy, in essence where economic growth is not defined as some abstract such as GDP figures, but rather in how it can improve the life chances of the population. Bearing in mind in your speech you said that our people are everything and that everybody has to have a stake in the opportunities and a stake in the distribution for wealth. So how can we ensure that this is a message that we get to voters more effectively?
Well, absolutely. It is, we know from polling and speaking to people, one of the most persuasive arguments for independence, that the well-being economy, or what I like to call prosperity with a purpose, is very compelling. That is why my economic outlook is based on enriching communities. It's based on supporting pensioners with better energy prices. It's about how we eradicate poverty and inequality and build fairness into the system. I said in my remarks that it's not just what business we do, but it's how we do our business that will make the biggest difference. Now, we know that the UK economy is extremely unequal. And for independence to mean anything to people, it needs to mean proper change. It needs to mean an end to poverty, and it needs to mean sharing wealth, and it needs to mean creating wealth that resolve some of the social challenges that we face. So it's absolutely right. Now, sometimes these terms become used and we forget what they mean, but the well-being economy really means prosperity with a purpose. Now, I think we need to break that down and illustrate what that means when we are knocking on doors or when we are talking about the economy. And, we've already addressed some of that. But do you not find it absolutely astonishing that it's not an SNP minister, but the chief executive of an energy company that said Scotland should theoretically, considering its wealth of renewables, be seeing cheaper, or indeed he did use the word free, energy bills. That's incredible. What a story. So why not? Well, it's not because we aren't building the renewable energy. We heard that from Gillian. We are. And the First Minister set out this morning some of the incredible steps that we have taken on energy. That's an incredible story. So why not? Well, it's because regulation hasn't been fixed. The energy market is still broken. It's been broken for an awfully long time. And are we going to sit and wait for it to continue to be broken and to watch our pensioners plunged into greater fuel poverty? That is the kind of rhetoric, narrative, and real substantive reality that we can share with people. So that was a long-winded way of me saying 100%, I totally agree, and the way we do it is by making it real for people. Thank you.
Now, I've got a number of questions for the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, principally around trains from Duncan Mitchell and from Michael Grigori. Essentially, when will we see an improvement in ScotRail services that they provide to members of the public, and what can the government do to ensure that ScotRail keep their regular timetables and prevent incidents?
So clearly we've had a period of a temporary timetable that's caused disruption. I absolutely appreciate that. The reason for that is because train drivers, perfectly able and capable of doing this, are just working their normal hours. They're not working rest days or their additional overtime. That's because of a dispute that's been ongoing in terms of pay. We know that public pay obviously has been pressured over the summer. I'm very pleased that the rail unions are recommending approval of the latest pay offer that's been put forward to them. Now, to understand that historically the rail operation across the UK have relied on drivers working their rest time and overtime, I don't think that's the right way forward. I think we need to employ more drivers. And can I tell you, since we took over that public ownership and control, there are 400 more people employed on our railways, 260 more drivers have been trained, and there's another 160 already in progress. Now, those two combination means that we should get back to being one of the best performing railway services in Scotland. We're on the case. We want to work collectively with our rail unions in particular to make those improvements to our rail service and to invest in our rail service to make sure that we can make it more attractive to ensure that more people use our rail services in the future.
Thank you, Fiona. Now, as you would anticipate, we've got a few more questions around energy policy, and I'm going to bring a few questions together that may actually be quite cross-cutting across various responsibilities, perhaps Fiona in terms of her previous background in international posts, Gillian obviously holding the fort in terms of energy, and there's probably quite a fundamental question about growing our economy. So, bearing in mind that the global economy, and we've heard from debates today that there has been some commentary and I suppose some concern that our renewable energy infrastructure is dependent on other states. There are obvious concerns about some states being hostile or not holding up a human rights record. And it's how do we, protect Scotland's interests in terms of that we are open for business, we want to create prosperity for people to share, but how do we have appropriate economic relations that protect our natural assets, but also de-risk our relationships with other states? And that came from Stuart from Cathcart Constituency Association.
Right, so I guess there's a few things around security. You could mean security in terms of things that I've read quite a lot of commentary that they might be worried about particular governments putting, getting into to Scotland or the wider UK or whatever with components that are used as sort of like spyware or whatever. I can assure you everything that comes in is rigorously assessed, and all the relationships with all the companies that invest in Scotland are all rigorously assessed in that regard. But there's another sort of security aspect to things, and that's about our fuel security. We are in a fortunate position in Scotland is that we have been we generate the majority of our own fuel supply, and the rest of it we export mainly to the rest of the UK, or indeed the oil goes into the international market. So we have been less exposed to the situation that our partners and our friends in Central Europe have with regard to the Ukrainian war and the cessation of trade relationships with fuel, particularly from Russian gas. But there's lessons in there for all of us. I think that we have to make sure that going forward, we always make sure that we're working with people that have the same values as us as much as possible, and that when we're offering opportunities for foreign investment, that it's a springboard to more investments in Scottish companies. I'll come back to what I said earlier about the ScotWind rounds. There are international companies who are have got together to bid for those licenses, but there's very clear commitments in there that they must be locally procuring and working with a Scottish supply chain. We already have a supply chain that is internationally recognised and is working across renewables and oil and gas right now. We need to make it so that when we attract the likes of Sumitomo, that the investment that we put in getting them here is actually going to be repaid to us tenfold, 100-fold. That we make sure that they're. You look at what's happening in the Port of Nig and the opportunities that there are for building of houses. That is going to mean that they'll have the accommodation for the workers that are going to deploy everything we want to see out there in Scotland. But it's also going to leave a lasting legacy for the community that has lost so many of their young people to other parts of the UK because they haven't been able to get affordable housing. So when we attract people, we need to have those discussions with them about what they are going to bring to the people of Scotland, because that is one of the levers that we do have, because they want to come here, because the investment opportunities in Scotland are massive. We have people rapping on our door wanting to invest in Scotland, but they cannot come here, make their money and leave. There needs to be a lasting legacy, and I think that the people that we have attracted so far are absolutely up for that.
Thank you, Gillian. Is there anything you would like to add, Fiona?
The only thing I'd reflect, the Deputy First Minister opened her remarks talking about the international outlook of Scotland. And pre-COVID, my last visit internationally was in Berlin, and I was talking to the federal government in Germany about the opportunities to work with Scotland on our export of our energy, and particularly hydrogen, so they weren't that dependent on Russian gas exports. So we want to be an international partner of choice, and we want to be a dependable international partner of choice when we join the European Union as an independent nation. So how we behave, how we do our business, as Kate has just described, is really important, not just domestically, but how we are seen and respected and understood and accepted as an international independent state by our partners in the future.
Thank you, Fiona. And one quick final question for DFM. Again, there's a few questions around concerns about how we ensure we can, run our vital services efficiently in the context that our economic levers are limited, declining funds from Westminster, and what is the role of the third sector and social enterprise in this? And we know that recently the Institute of Directors have had a lot to say about that as well.
Well, I think we believe in the SNP that wealth is not just monetary. Wealth is not just financial. And we have incredible wealth in this country of skills, of talent, and our third sector in particular can work with communities and people and families and households to really enrich the opportunities for them. So the third sector is a vital part of what we are trying to achieve economically. And I think that the second part is that at a time of constrained public finances, whether we want it or not, and I'm sure that the Finance Secretary will outline that more tomorrow, I think, that at a time of constrained public finances, we need to be clear about what we want to achieve and go out and really do it. Now, we have highlighted some of the biggest economic opportunities. When I look, for example, at what's happening around renewables, I want to see the investment that's being made in renewables also translate into building the affordable homes for the workers that will be needed. I want to see that funding. I want to see that funding going to improve our infrastructure. We need to have a joined-up approach that where there is an opportunity, it needs to have legacy. And that legacy needs to be felt and experienced by our communities. You know, I look at what was done in the 50s and the 60s in terms of hydro in my own part of the world. And the number of homes that were built that are still standing because they were good quality homes for the workers is impressive. That's the kind of thing we need to see across society. It's not just economic policy in a narrow vacuum that creates GDP growth. It's how does it enrich communities more generally?
Thank you very much, Deputy First Minister. Very grateful to Fiona Hislop and Gillian Martin also. And thank you for your forbearance conference. We are now going to move on to our next item of business, which is our topical and emergency resolution. So if you just bear with us for half a moment. That's all right. Looks good. Okay, so I just need to invite them to the floor. Is the amendment being... Okay, conference, if we can settle back down. We have our topical emergency motion. If it's not appeared on the screen behind me, I am reassured that it will very, very shortly. And can I invite Kazim Hani to the stage, please, who is the convener of Scots Asians for Independence, and he is going to propose the topical motion, which is in relation to the emergency humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Kazim, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Conference, Free Palestine. Delegates, we're almost a year from October the 7th, where hundreds of Israeli civilians were killed and kidnapped. Families were broken and the world was in shock. It was almost impossible to contemplate anything more horrific in recent times. Conference, I said almost. What followed October the 7th has not just become more horrific, but a never-ending nightmare for the Palestinians, who have been brutally bombarded, massacred, murdered, displaced, orphaned, widowed, with families totally annihilated. And we are having to witness these atrocities from our living room. Delegates, just a short time ago, I saw a picture on social media of our former First Minister Hamza Yusuf holding his newborn baby, smiling and looking into her eyes with affection and love. As a father myself, I was able to relate to that sense of joy but very quickly I remembered that I was reading about a father in Gaza who also would have felt that sense of joy and that love and affection. It was only when he returned from registering those births he found his 2 newborn babies and his wife blown to pieces. How was he feeling then? Delegates, how would you be feeling then? This is just an example of what Israeli Netanyahu's government calls self-defence. A place which is the biggest open-air prison, already struggling, already under occupation, already oppressed, was set on fire, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month, and still with no end in sight. It is the responsibility of every government, every elected member, every human being to call out this injustice. Nobody denies any country's right to defend itself, but Conference, this is not defence, this is genocide. Conference, what will it take for a cessation of hostilities? The Americans have put a deal on the table, but Netanyahu's government is not only a threat to the Palestinians, he is a threat to the Israelis. He is a threat to peace. He has cabinet ministers who openly call for the annihilation of Gaza and of Palestine. Conference, let me make it very clear that Scotland under an SNP government should not and cannot have bilateral relationships with an apartheid or genocidal state. If we support an apartheid state, then we too are complicit in their crimes. An SNP government must immediately pressure governments around the world, including the British government, for an immediate ceasefire and cessation of all hostilities. Conference, the Scottish Government must pressure the UK Government to end all arms sales and ensure no arms from Scotland are sold to Israel. Our SNP Government that must ensure that the rule of law is upheld and that the voice of the ICC and the ICJ is not silenced, and that Netanyahu and his gang of thugs are brought into the court to be held accountable for their actions. It is imperative that the Scottish Government continues to push for the recognition of a Palestinian state and continuously pressures governments around the world, including the UK Government, to recognise Palestine as a free and independent nation. Conference, our SNP Government must remain steadfast on its position and must ensure that no relations are normalised until the cessation of all hostilities, the immediate withdrawal of all Israeli forces in occupied territories, and the return of all occupied land and illegal settlements in the West Bank. The Scottish Government must immediately suspend all contracts and commercial arrangements with Israeli or Israeli-linked organisations until these conditions are met. Conference, we must stand on the right side of history. We must stand on the right side of justice, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In the great words of Nelson Mandela, and I quote, "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians." Delegates, Free Scotland, Free Palestine, please support the motion.
Thank you very much, Kazim. And now can I invite Tommy Shepherd to second the resolution, please. Tommy.
Conference, I support the right of Israel to exist, and I support its right to self-defence. But let us be clear, it is not self-defence to systematically bomb civilians sheltering in hospitals, schools and refugee camps, and to have now slaughtered more than 40,000 of them, most of whom had not engaged in combat against Israel. It is not self-defence to systematically carpet bomb residential areas and public infrastructure and reduce the Strip of Gaza to a barren wilderness full of rubble. Indeed, as the Republic of South Africa and others have said, the manner in which the Israeli state is prosecuting its case in Gaza and the other occupied territories, far from being justified under self-defense, now looks as if they are committing the crime of genocide and other breaches of international law. And we must, as a party and as a government, make sure we support the ICJ and facilitate its deliberations so that there is no quarter given and no place to hide for those responsible for these actions, whether it takes a month, a year, or a decade to bring them to account. And now this calamity has expanded into the other occupied Palestinian territories, and we see in the West Bank armed paramilitary gangs of settlers intimidating and terrorizing Palestinian villagers under the watchful and protective eye of Israeli state forces, and with champions for their action right at the heart of the Israeli government. Conference, there are three things we should do about this. The first is to reiterate our call for a ceasefire and demand that the UK is part of international pressure on Israel to bring it about. And that means, if Benjamin Netanyahu will not listen to reason, that we apply pressure and force to make him comply with international law by every political, diplomatic and economic means at our disposal. And the second thing we should do, as well as calling for an end to the attacks on civilians in Gaza, is to end the UK's complicity in it. And it is quite shocking that almost 2 months after its election, the new Labour government has not suspended arms sales to Israel, which are being deployed against innocent civilians. And the final thing we must do, as Kazim has said, is to urge new international peace talks for a lasting solution at which the Palestinian people must be at the table when their future is determined rather than left outside the door. And that means the immediate recognition of the state of Palestine. Not down the line as some reward for compromise, but now to recognize their right to self-determination. This is what we should do. And Conference, just finally, let me be clear, nothing illustrates the case for our government, for our country to become a self-governing country better than this. Because if we were independent, the people of Scotland would not have to hang their heads in shame at the actions that others take on their behalf, but could join the rest of humanity in the world in calling for justice for Palestine and standing in support and solidarity with the Palestinian people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tommy. We have two other cards in to speak for the resolution. Given the gravity of the matter, I would be willing to accept those. We are pushed for time. So I do appeal to both Sandra White for brevity for less than 2 minutes. And similarly, Annam, if you can comply with that as well, that would be much appreciated. So anyway, welcome back to SNP Conference, Sandra White. Sandra has been enjoying her retirement, but has spent many years in the Scottish Parliament on the cross-party group on Palestine. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you, and I want to thank the mover and the seconder for this resolution. Conference, I've been in Gaza, I've been in the West Bank, I've been in the hospitals, I've been in the schools, and I've saw how the Palestinian people are treated, not just since October the 7th, but for 76 years they've been treated in this way. I've seen water turned off, I've seen electricity turned off, I've seen babies in incubators with the electricity is turned off and they cannot get any attention. Now, that is not a regime that we and the Scottish National Party should have anything to do with whatsoever. No diplomatic... We talk about diplomacy and meeting with these people. I have been asked to meet with them. I think other people in this room would see how they work And I really couldn't believe the naivety of our party thinking that the Israelis would not use this photo opportunity as something to say that basically we were talking about various things and it puts them in a good light. And that's a criticism that I think has to be said, the naivety that it would not be used against us, against Scotland. I wear this with pride because I've seen how the Palestinians have treated, but I have never, ever seen what's happening just now. And if I thought I would, a genocide, as Tommy and others had said, an absolute genocide on the TV. When did we ever think we'd be able to watch a genocide coming from the television? And every single Western country, UK, America in particular, still selling arms to them, still sending arms to them, and yet people are being murdered every single day. I think it's an absolute disgrace, and I thank you for taking this emergency resolution. I know I'm out of time now, but please support the resolution.
Thank you, Sandra. And can I invite Anam onto the stage, please? Anam Kazir from Airdrie and Shorts. And Anam has recently visited Palestine and wishes to share some of her experiences.
Good afternoon, Conference. The Palestinian people have been oppressed by successive regimes, and currently the most right-wing under Netanyahu. They live under systemic and oppressive discrimination, and they have done so since the Nakba. This is not new, and this has not been the case since the 7th of October. I want to share a story with you, Conference. Last year, I visited Palestine on a cross-party delegation along with Medical Aid for Palestinians who have a stall here at Conference. And when I was out there, I visited a neonatal ward that MAP funds. In that ward, there were tiny premature babies, beeping monitors and medical staff, yet there were no parents, there were no families. I asked why that was, and it was explained to me that movement restrictions and a blockade on Gaza, so this is before the 7th of October, separates mothers from babies. Al-Maqasid Hospital is the only level 4 neonatal unit in the occupied Palestinian territories. So if a mother has a high risk or a complex pregnancy, and if she's from the West Bank or from Gaza, she must travel to East Jerusalem to Al-Maqasid Hospital. But because of movement restrictions imposed upon Palestinians, she must apply for a permit from Israeli authorities. If that permit's approved, it usually only lasts for a few days. If the baby isn't ready for discharge when the permit expires, the mother must leave alone. Conference, you heard me clearly and correctly. The mother must return home while the baby remains in hospital. Depriving babies of close contact with mothers and the opportunity to breastfeed is acutely distressing. Babies who do not recover may die at this hospital with no family around them. And I take this opportunity to remind you, Conference, that this was from before the 7th of October. But right now, Conference, there are babies in Al-Maqasid Hospital in East Jerusalem. And Conference, if those babies are from Gaza, then because of the ongoing genocide, their family members may have already been killed. Their mothers may have already been killed. And these babies lying alone in a neonatal unit in East Jerusalem may never be reunited with their families. Conference, I urge you to support this emergency motion. It should not be controversial to say that we need a ceasefire now and that arms sales to Israel should not be sold. In years to come, our children and grandchildren will ask us, what did you do when Gaza was being relentlessly bombed? What did you do when there was an ongoing genocide in front of our eyes? In Conference, we must say that we're on the right side of history.
Thank you, Anna. Conference, there are no cards against the emergency resolution, and I put it to you that we accept this resolution by acclaim. Well, that brings today's formal proceedings to an end. There will be fringe meetings and other activities for people to partake of this evening. I hope you have a good evening, and I will see you all here bright and sharp tomorrow morning. Have a good evening, and thank you.